Good day, everyone. Welcome to our presentation around 2021 Delivering Frictionless Commerce. My name is Mike Leibovitz. I'm the Vice President of Product Management at Pivotree. Here at Pivotree, we are a leading provider of frictionless commerce solutions. We are really an end-to-end vendor supporting our clients from strategy to selection, deployment, and all the way through ongoing hosting and management of commerce infrastructure. With me today, really excited to have Susan Cito from Environics. Susan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Mike. Hello, I'm Susan Cito. I'm VP of Market Strategy at Environics Research Group. Environics Research Group has over 5 decades of experience partnering with clients to identify issues and to solve business problems, spanning a range of consumer and B2B applications, covering a wide range of industries. So what is frictionless commerce and why should it matter? E-commerce adoption has really advanced dramatically over the COVID-19 pandemic. According to some estimates, we actually saw within the first 3 months of pandemic, we vaulted forward 10 years in digital adoption. We have 40% of customers trying new brands, making new purchases with a retailer during the shutdown. When you're taking a look at the convergence of technologies in the mobile and payments and data and logistics space, you're really seeing a raising of the bar in terms of the possibilities for that seamless customer experience. It's really essentially resetting expectations. Yet at the same time, many businesses were behind the curve investing in e-commerce solutions. They were ill-prepared when the pandemic hit. So in order to remain competitive, brands really must adapt to consumers' emerging needs and evolving expectations for where and how they discover, shop, and engage with the products and services that they buy to meet them where they're at. The growth of e-commerce innovation and unique opportunities that are provided really helps you to reimagine that space for how to re-engage and engage consumers in a differentiated value offering. With a lot of the economic uncertainty that's coming up and that will be faced likely over the next 2 to 5 years, it becomes even more critical that investments made to improve that digital customer experience really deliver the greatest returns. You need to know where to focus your efforts wisely. And as decision makers, you really need to be able to understand those underlying motivations and need states as they relate to frictionless commerce, to be able to adapt and provide that superior online experience and enable customers to make the most of that precious, non-recoverable commodity that they have, their time. So how are companies delivering? A recent survey conducted by Environics Research, we found that 49% of consumers who shopped online were dissatisfied with their overall e-commerce experience. That's half who were disappointed with their experience somewhere along the process. Some come from a place where they're familiar with online and digital experiences. For others, they were entirely thrust into this new activity, testing out a lot of new behaviors. So if your brand or organization doesn't deliver, you may be locked out of that customer's consideration. In partnership with Pivotree, we examined e-commerce satisfaction and brand loyalty across 9 retail consumer categories to identify those category leaders, as well as to uncover how brands can provide that meaningful experience and to grow customer loyalty and affinity over time. So while the research was conducted in a B2C context, it has application in the B2B space. There are indicators on how to be competitive. So which customer touchpoints along the value chain have the most impact, will present the strongest opportunities to influence a positive and seamless experience? While they would likely vary by sector and business, each service delivery point would offer a potential to strengthen that relationship or lose them. Understanding the relationship between the 6 dimensions of frictionless commerce and the associated barriers necessitates a tailored assessment of your particular customers and their expectations, as well as your organization's ability and readiness to adapt to their needs. The customers that we spoke to indicated that in order to build loyalty and affinity, brands must deliver on 6 dimensions of frictionless commerce: fulfillment and multi-channel alignment, security and payment options, ease of access, design and navigation, personalization, positive friction, and customer service. Which ones are the most important to your industry or business? Well, that depends on category and sector. Take the pet care category. You can see that fulfillment and multi-channel alignment come to the top compared to some of those softer elements of customer experience. This is really a category where customers are well informed, there's direct decision-making and habitual behaviors that are taking place. Customers want to be sure that they get exactly what they want when they need it and when they expect it. There's certainty in arrival status that's needed and transparency around tariffs and taxes that really matter. So as a B2B organization that's operating in a very similar space or have similar operations, it becomes really critical that the supply chain and inventory are well managed to get the product to customers in a timely manner. In contrast, with clothing and apparel, you can see ease of access, design and navigation dominates, along with positive friction and personalization. This is a category where the ability to browse and explore and find what you're looking for becomes much more important. So the ability to provide those product details, that level of information, and even the ability to test and try out options really comes to the forefront. And including something similar in the B2B space, it really does present more opportunities to tailor and customize products and to the experience, and even potentially delight and go beyond the expectations of your customer. I'm going to hand it over to Mike, who will unpack what this means and how this translates to how you deliver to customers across the value chain.
Thanks, Susan. You know, when we think about the commerce ecosystem or the value chain, as you can see on the slide, there's really a lot of factors that come into play for any type of retailer that's out there, B2B and even B2C as well. It's the pieces that come together that we really think about: where are points of friction being induced and where can we potentially correct them? One thing is, as we think about frictionless thinking or the thought process around it, is that we note that really all customers have in common the need for seamless experiences, really trying to achieve a maximum benefit with the least amount of time and effort. This is probably the simplest way to define frictionless commerce. These characteristics absolutely have a direct and measurable link to those factors that enable companies to dominate their markets. And that's really what we start to dig into and unpack. And so we think about all the steps in the ecosystem, from the raw materials and the suppliers and the manufacturers, distributors, the retailers, to the consumers. And we start to explore and unpack what areas within that ecosystem can we impact, which ones can we positively impact, and what are the net outcomes of doing so. When we think about the results of a broken ecosystem, well, a broken ecosystem, I think we've all been there. We've all lived in some of these real world scenarios, and some of it can be awfully painful. And I'll describe a few of them on this slide. So again, we think about this end-to-end ecosystem from the time something is being manufactured to the time that it gets to an end customer or end consumer. When we think about, poor supply chain, what happens in a scenario where supply chain is not optimized or perhaps highly functional? At a consumer or customer level, you'd hear things like, why can't anyone tell me where my order is or when it'll arrive? Certainly a point of friction, and one that nobody really is satisfied when they don't know where their products are. From a data or inputs, if you think about some of the impacts that could be made with the supplier, right? Again, what are the things that we may hear? We may hear things like, this isn't what I thought I ordered. The size and the color are just simply off, right? The data was a problem in this particular example. From a technology standpoint, perhaps a technology integration standpoint, you hear customers saying things like, I've been a customer for years, but it seems like they know nothing about me, right? How's that possible? I've spent so much money. They still are acting as though I'm a stranger. We've never done business before. When we think about the inventory, right? Do we have inventory? So it certainly goes back to the supply chain side, but is something readily available? Is my distribution center, do I have product ready to go? We hear things like, they're out of my favorite flavor, as an example. Maybe the competition has stock, right? Maybe I look somewhere else for the product that I really want to get either shipped or to pick up immediately. And then certainly at the last standpoint, you can think about what happens to the end customer when there's just a mismatch, right? What happens? Like, how come I didn't know that the batteries weren't included? Like, these are all primary examples of what we would describe as a broken ecosystem, right? Where pieces of that ecosystem really start to derail the end-to-end experience that we're trying to provide. And so it's not just one thing that may break, right? It's really something that's more systematic in terms of how we think, how we approach solving this problem. And so when we think about really the ecosystem, the end-to-end ecosystem, we start thinking more about frictionless. We start thinking about what's our ability to impact our business from an end-to-end standpoint. And this concept is much more than just what happens on my website or what happens on my supply chain, or should I invest in a small IT project to upgrade or update a part of my infrastructure. This is really taking a more holistic look from your core business out to your extended enterprise, and then the entire business ecosystem that surrounds everything you can do, or everything that you do from a business standpoint. So core business, not just the suppliers and the internal groups and your channels, your distribution networks, but as you start to go out, the suppliers of your suppliers, your direct customers, your indirect customers, customers of my customers, and certainly the complementary products and services. And of course, when we unpack that at one level kind of higher or bigger, stakeholders, investors, owners, government agencies, competing organizations, all of these things start to come and start to impact ultimately the way that we want to think about these things. And so if we sort of summarize that thought, is we don't just think about frictionless in terms of the journey of a buyer or of a customer. It's really about reducing or eliminating friction from not just that journey, but from the entire business ecosystem. This is an approach more holistically that really would deliver true competitive advantage, something that can be benchmarked, measured, and scored and weighted against your competitors and against the marketplace in which you are competing. The question as we get to the interesting point or the heart of the conversation is, well, how do you do that? How do you understand these things? How do you benchmark and start to help organizations understand where points of friction are being induced and which ones are of most value to be solved? Ultimately, we have a strategy. So Pivotree and Environics working together have built strategies that impact processes really to create a decision-making framework. We want to enable organizations to fully understand the cause and the effect of reducing friction. We need to set clear and measurable goals while defining the changes needed for an enterprise really across the entire ecosystem to take advantage of frictionless commerce. And so what we'll show and we'll start to highlight is a framework, a fundamental process with which to evaluate your business today and the business that you want to be, because the real heart of this is understanding where should money be invested, what return do I expect, what outcome or impact do I want to make, but can I really zero in and really figure out where is the best place to focus my business and the investments that I want to make. So from this standpoint, when we think about benchmarking tools, we really think about those three things kind of on the left side. How do we identify the points of friction? How do we evaluate the impact? And then what sort of solution can we put to remove? And as you see the animation start to come in, this is the way that we start to benchmark current capabilities, areas where you're strong, areas where perhaps you're not as strong from a market standpoint. We're able to insert and heat map different areas, parts of your organization, and actually measure them against competitors, give you that real benchmark and that real view of what's going on yourself compared to the market and compared to direct competitors as well, and come up with areas where the best dollar spent, the biggest impact that you can make. And of course, this is just an example that we're illuminating, happens to be a real example, one that we worked with a customer their name's been protected for obvious reasons. But what you start to illuminate is when I invest in these areas like customer data, like customer service, like order management for this particular scenario, we start to put facts and figures behind that. We start to derive outcomes. So of course, every time that you invest, you want to see a return. Being able to really characterize the return, the reason that you're investing in a certain area as it benchmarks and as it compares out competition and to the marketplace, we start to put in exactly this framework. So we would call this a frictionless framework, a benchmarking capability. And you could see some of the examples around increase in UX leading to an increase in retention rates as an example in the customer service area. And so real world example that we've used in our benchmarking capability to help a customer move forward on their journey to removing friction and becoming really a frictionless company and organization. So how do you build, right? What are the right areas to think about in terms of why is this benchmark important? Why would we step into this? Would we be interested in stepping into this with companies like Pivotree and Environics and learning more and really getting more competitive? Think about these three critical factors. These three critical factors ultimately illuminates if the benchmark and a journey for frictionless makes sense for your organization. We certainly feel implored to say that yes, all organizations should view themselves through this type of lens and applying those critical factors, right? The kind of those three choices. Where should we fight? What are we going to differentiate? And how can we get on market? Having a plan, having a tactical execution plan for your business strategy, of course, makes sense. Being able to align your business strategy and the investments you're making, not only in IT, but in processes, and again, across that entire business ecosystem is really key and critical. And so as you identify and benchmark your company's capabilities and you understand the dynamics of those, you really start to enable your entire organization to move as one. That is really the essence of what we're talking about. Is you want to be able to align and execute tasks across the organization, understanding the impact that you're driving and the measurement that you put behind that. So it's really about value and speed and the precision to make the kind of maximize your cost effectiveness. And again, when we go back to the beginning and we think about sort of that definition of frictionless commerce, it's really about that seamless experience, right? Maximizing the benefits, the least amount of time and effort, and being really specific, really pinpoint on when and where you're investing and why. So from that standpoint, as we wrap up and hopefully we've said enough to get you interested in some of these concepts around frictionless commerce and removing the friction from your organization. One thing we'd like to point out is that there is an available report, great research done by Environics. We highlighted or illuminated a little bit of that research earlier on in this presentation. So available for download is a complete white paper that really explores and extrapolates the concepts that we've shared with you here, and certainly goes into more detail as well around how you can start to embark on delivering frictionless commerce within and for your organization. Of course, both Pivotree and Environics, we're here to help. We'd love to engage any of you that are out there that are really interested in taking a deeper dive with us. You see some contact information that's up there. Please reach out. We'd love opportunity to give some of our advice, some of our own advisory services for any of you that are interested to really take a kind of a deeper view on this frictionless journey, these benchmarking tools, frameworks that we have in place that can really help you accelerate your own company's journey in removing friction and ultimately becoming more competitive and driving bigger and greater revenue for your organization. And so with that, I certainly would like to take the opportunity from both Pivotree and Environics. Susan, thank you so much for co-presenting with me today. Again, my name's Mike Leibovitz.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having the opportunity to present and share our information and our viewpoint on how to drive frictionless commerce in the industry today.